All right, this is a live look at the White House now, where President Biden is expected to address the nation in just a few hours. He's already called Trump to congratulate him on his win and express his support for a peaceful transition of power. And for more on what Biden is expected to say today and his final weeks in office, I want to bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. So, Willie, good to see you. What can you tell us about the plans for a transition and communication between the president and President-elect's teams?
Hey there, Tom. Good to be with you this morning. Well, as you mentioned, President Biden has already made that phone call to President Trump to congratulate him on his win. He also talked to the vice president as well. But behind the scenes, the government is already working on that transition. As Jake mentioned, the Trump team is working on that. But the GSA, or General Services Administration, has already notified the Trump team of their benefits, so to speak, in terms of winning this election. Those benefits include an office, IT help, everything the president-elect would need to transition to power come January. Now, of course, this is something that former President Trump, now the president-elect, has gone through before when he won in 2016. But he'll go through this again, the same process that every president-elect goes through when they essentially win the election and when a concession takes place, as Vice President Kamala Harris did yesterday. So we know that the teams are talking amongst each other, and the president today, as you mentioned, he's going to address the nation from the Rose Garden at 11 a.m. today. Tom.
Yeah, and speaking of that address, what do we expect to hear from Biden in that speech today?
Yeah, I anticipate a part of that speech will focus on President Biden and Vice President Harris. He congratulated her. He also talked about the historic nature of her campaign. Remember, this isn't something that President Biden wanted. He decided to run for a re-election, but then he dropped out of the race, and that essentially put Vice President Harris in line to take the Democratic nomination after President Biden threw his support behind her. I anticipate he'll talk a little bit about that, but he'll also touch on the transition of power. That is something that Vice President Kamala Harris talked about in her concession speech yesterday, that peaceful transition of power. That's almost something that certainly didn't happen last time around when President Trump lost the 2020 election. But still, nonetheless, the President Biden, and Vice President Harris saying they're committed to that peaceful transition of power. I'll also note that President Biden has invited President Trump, the president-elect, to the White House to sit down, and we'll see those pictures of the two men sitting together in perhaps the Oval Office in the weeks to come. No date set yet on that meeting, but the White House did announce that President Biden has offered that olive branch to the president-elect, Tom.
Yeah, to be a fly on the wall of some of those conversations. Willie James Inman at the White House. Willie, thank you for that.